All right, hey everyone. I was gonna try to put Schaeffer Cox's his plan is to pull a Gandhi and not a Rambo as the introduction. But when I recreate the video with that as the introduction, it messes up all the clarity on the documents. And I would rather have clarity on the document so you guys can see exactly the same thing that I'm reading. But this is part 4, I believe. We're going to start with page 37. We'll see how far we get. This is a lady that works very, very hard to maintain her position in the kingdom of Satan. She's paid very well by the Federal Reserve, fiat currency, to destroy families and to imprison innocent men. And because she works so hard to maintain her position in the kingdom of Satan and to imprison innocent men, we should be working just as hard to tear her down and to expose her for the evil Jezebel, wicked witch that she is. That's her mentor, Karen Loeffler, the Attorney General of Alaska, that's been asked to leave by Jeff Sessions. We're glad that she's out of the picture, but she needs to be held accountable for the wickedness that she's done. And she should be behind bars, or she should be brought to justice by the righteous, and she should be punished for her wickedness. This is the address of Schaeffer Cox. I pray you guys write him a letter. That's not what I wanted to bring up. This right here is the Dropbox location. I'll put that link in the description bar. You guys can read this for yourself. But let's get started. All right. So page 37 matches Schaeffer's 37 down here. The forked-tongue liar Yvonne wrote in her appeal case against Schaeffer Cox, Cox and his family could hide out at rental cabins owned by Barney. At the meeting, Cox also discussed the grenades he possessed and expressed his desire to get grenades with longer delayed fuses. Cox told Barney, Thessing, and Olson, "I would like to have 8-second fuses and powder that burns fast enough to really send that shrapnel flying because we're using the 2-second fuses right now." Section 9. Cox becomes a fugitive, continues to prepare for 2-for-1, and moves his weapon stash. As planned, Cox failed to appear for his February 14, 2011 court hearing. Barney and Olson attend the hearing to find out if an arrest warrant was issued for Cox. Judge McConaughey indeed issued an arrest warrant. Cox, now a fugitive, moved into Vernon's residence. Cox, Lonnie, and Karen Vernon and Olson met at the Vernon's residence on February the 14th and February 15th, 2011. Cox, he puts a BS alert here. Cox and Vernon talk about ways to set up booby traps to block access to he puts a BS alert there. So again, this is page 37 right there. We're going to go over here to page 37. This is what Schaeffer has to say to Yvonne's lies. AER 1297, Cox hadn't actually spoken to Anderson about a list. Anderson had not said he'd only give it to Cox. They hadn't spoken at all. Cox was just saying this to get Olson to stop pestering. Keep in mind, $300,000 Olson is a government informant who has incentives if Cox gets convicted and thrown in jail. 37. Again, AER 1299-1302, Cox says nothing about booby traps in this clip. He says we just need to be someplace where they wouldn't look. Okay, let's go over to page 38. As you can see, this is page 38. Vernon's house by law enforcement. Cox described his vision of the plan. It gets bloody when we've got our crap together enough to make a good effort at round 2. Olson, yeah. Cox, round 1 is going to be easy. Round 2 is where the work starts. Olson, $300,000 whore, yeah. Cox, and we can do round 1 right now. I think the blood starts is when we feel like it starts either just the point of total desperation and there's nothing else and it's just a Hail Mary before you get swallowed up alive, or when you've got the power to possibly prevail. $300,000 whore, yeah. When they've recognized the power. Cox, it's not like we're waiting for them to get bad enough. And he puts a BS alert. Cox later summarized, so what do? We kill a whole buttload of them and then offer peace. He puts a BS alert. The next day, Cox and Olson discussed a variety of firearms and scopes, and Cox explained that they were probably going to be doing their battling at houses instead of the woods. Okay, this is page 38 right here. We're going to come over to Schaeffer Cox rebuttal. 38, AER 1304, $300,000 whore. Olson asked if he should get that list from him, Anderson. Cox replies, we're not going to do anything like that right now anyway, so I guess it's not too pressing. He also says on 38, AER 1308, Cox says to do just TV and newspapers and Gandhi-type passive-aggressive shenanigans out the wazoo. Just be creative and aggressive. Vernon, we're doing the same plan. Cox, just as much as you can without turning bloody. $300,000 whore. Yeah, at what point does it get bloody? Cox, I don't know, man. And keep in mind, as I'm researching this, and I put up many videos, and I can give video evidence of my statement that I'm about to make, $300,000 whore prods Cox over and over and over again about violent 241 plan. It's like Olson is just sitting at the table and he's constantly prodding Cox. When does it get bloody? When do we do 241? When do we do 241? When do we do 241? $300,000 whore Olson is an absolute piece of human garbage. Okay, let's go on to see what's next. We just did a 38. We got another. Okay, we got more of 38. Cox, I don't know, man. Cox then goes on to say we can't do anything violent because we'd be dead in the first round. Another 38. AER 1318. Cox is not saying to kill a whole buttload of people. He's asking a question. So what do we do? He's trying to point out that there is no follow-up move after violence. It's just game over and we lose. The clip cuts out the net. It's just game over and we lose. The clip cuts out that context. Another 38. Check the inaudibles. They weren't inaudible at all. They were exculpatory. AER 1323. Another 38. AER 1322, Cox says, and if they kick in the door, then I'll just go with them. No sense in you guys dying at this point. Inaudible, i.e. the rest of the sentence is exculpatory. All right, then he goes to 39, which means we need to go to 39. All right, here we go. This is page 39 right here, and that goes with that 39. A few days later, Cox and his family moved into Barney's home. Cox took along his firearms, his body armor, and his CS grenades. At a meeting later that day, attended by Cox, Barney, and Olson, Cox spoke again about the 241 plan. Cox said, if we all shook hands and went out of here to go roll judges' heads, I mean, we're definitely morally justified. Regarding 241, Cox said, but I can't say that I think for right now a 241 would be running out ahead of scale and sacrificing ourselves to no avail. But Barney responded that our troops, and that's the scale starting to tip when they see more people that start to wake up and come out to our aid. And even if they still have greater numbers, there'll be a point to where even the guerrilla warfare and stuff like that, 241, becomes a real possibility at that point, because you actually have enough people on your side that you can pay 241 for a while. All right, that's the page 39. Let's see what Schaeffer has to say about page 39. Vernon's never heard of a list until $300,000 whore Olson brings it up. AER 1334. Another 39. AER 1342. Olson tells the Vernons that Cox wanted them to do a 241. This is not true, and it's very unfair to me and the Vernons for Olson to be using my name like that. He used Coleman's name too. I wonder if there are recordings of just Olson and the Vernons that we never got in the discovery because it was in their separate case. I wonder if the Vernons were mad at Cox and Barney for not being on board with the fighting. Could that be on the recordings? Another 39. AER 1363. Cox says he's going to Coleman Barney's house, then getting out of the country in the next 72 hours. Another 39. AER 1367 through 1381. Cox says that we can't do a 241 because we're the family militia, and it would only hurt our families and make our enemies stronger. Okay, now we need to go over to page 40. As you can see, this is page 40. Cox said that his subconscious goal was to get prepared to execute 2-for-1 that needed to be. I think that it needs three more things here. AER 1377. Cox said one thing it needs is more public pain. Second, Cox said, we just need more numbers. Later in the conversation, Cox and Barney agreed that if the government took one of their kids, that's a 2-for-1. Cox also said, well, I'm not going to target women and children, but I'm not opposed to killing them either, you know. I mean, God had them kill men, women, and children. Cox told Barney and Olson that the purpose of killing somebody is to prevent them from killing the innocent. And I'm not against some like drastic, shocking things either, like, you know, mailing heads to people. Cox then said, I don't want to gloat, just make people suffer. Cox also told Barney and Olson, I think if you got the time and resources, you ought to give them proper burial, you know. Okay, so that's page 40 in Yvonne Lamoureux's appeal. Let's go to page 40 of Schaeffer Cox. This says, Cox then said, I don't want to gloat, just want to make people suffer. But the real quote is, I don't want to gloat, just make people suffer to suffer. There's no profit in that. If it serves the purpose of protecting your family and liberty and law, then you know, okay. But if it's just to satisfy your vengeance and your bloodlust and your anger, that's going to make just a wicked stronghold in your heart, and that's going to dominate you for the rest of your life. You will not recover from that sort of combat. That will fry your soul. Okay, now let's move over to page 41. Here we are, page 41 right here. Page 41, and that matches that 41 there. Cox also told Barney and Olson that while the victims had value as human beings, that doesn't mean that I won't kill you or that I wouldn't hang your body from a lamppost to deter others. 2 days later, Cox told Barney and Olson Cox took Barney and Olson to a property he owned where he stored weapons in a shed. At Cox's direction, Barney and Olson moved assault rifles, ammunition, and approximately 8 grenades from Cox's shed into Barney's truck. Cox and others continued to build their arsenal of weapons. The next day, Cox, Arnie, and Olson met again at Barney's residence. Barney related a conversation he had with an arms dealer and explosive dealer about a rumor that 8 grenades had been stolen from Fort Wainwright, and Cox had them. Barney continued, me and Schaeffer were talking about it and thinking 8 grenades doesn't sound like a lot unless you're one of the judges or DAs we're looking at. Later in February 2011, Cox, Barney, and Olson met at Barney's residence and discussed getting silencers. Cox ordered a pistol and silencer matched set from Olson. Cox then discussed with Barney and Olson how a silencer would work. All right, that's page 41 right there. I'm going to come over here to Schaeffer Cox, 41. AER 1398. This is an incredibly stupid conversation, but it's not about any sort of plot to do anything specific to anyone in particular in the foreseeable future. It's just abstract pontification on the rules of engagement during warfare. It's already been settled that we're not doing a 2-for-1 or anything like it at this point. 41. She's trying to make it sound like I was leaving my stuff to Joe because I was about to die. All right. Oh, wait, sorry, that's 44. So we go from 41 to 44. Let's see if we even have 44. That's 42. That's 43. Here we go. That's 44 right here. Okay, this 44 matches this statement. Okay. Those with red phones were to carry them at all times and have them charged up and ready to go. In making final preparations, Cox handed some notes to Olson to deliver for him. One of those notes was to one of his tenants, listing things for the tenant to take over and also describing what Cox was leaving for him. I want you to have my yellow coat and ice axe if I don't make it back. The AR with the grenade launchers is yours if I don't make it back. 12. Cox's efforts to obtain database containing victim information. Cox called Anderson to ask him for people's addresses. Between August 2010 and March 2011, Cox referred to the existence of a list with information about government officials and Anderson's connection with it several times. He puts a BS alert here. For example, during a conversation at Cox's house, Cox told Olson, Cox, there are the number 2 troopers, $300,000 whore Olson. Oh, okay. Cox, and then do you know who Mike Anderson is? $300,000 whore Olson. No, uh-huh. Cox, okay, he has everybody's, $300,000 whore Olsen address. Okay, again, this is page 44. And then he says, she's trying, meaning Yvonne Lamoureux, she's trying to make it sound like I was leaving my stuff to Joe because I was about to die. If I don't make it back, I was moving out of the country and couldn't come back as long as there are people in Alaska out to kill me. It's the opposite of how she tries to point it out here. Another page 44. AER 1278 through 97 doesn't refer to a list with information about government officials at all. It just says Mike knows how to look people up on the internet. Okay, and then he goes on to page 45, which will go on to page 45. Here we are, page 45. That matches that 45. Okay, as you can see, I'm sure this is not only draining for Schaeffer Cox, it's draining for everyone concerned. I mean, it's just they have spun such a web of deceit around the Schaeffer Cox story that it's just absolutely insane. And Schaeffer did say this whole effort drains him quite a bit, and I can understand why. Mr. Cox, and he's got them all, Olsen, yeah, so he's got the, all the actual specific addresses and everything. Cox, yeah. During the same conversation, Cox showed Olsen a map where Trooper Ron Wall and BB lived. Cox described Anderson's skills, saying, you call him in 20 seconds, he's got it. At the end of the meeting, Cox told Olsen, I can give you I think this is a much better plan than holding up in a bunker. We know where all you guys live too, and you want to be friends? We can be friends and we can be enemies. What do you want to be? At Cox's direction, Olsen contacted Anderson about getting the database, but Anderson refused to give the information to Olsen. While at the Vernon's house, Cox explained to Olsen and the Vernons that Mike Anderson got skittish of giving information, and that Anderson would rather just give it directly to Cox. Cox puts a BS alert here. The Vernons also tried to get the database from Anderson. Okay. Whoops. This is page 45. We're going to jump over here to page 45. AER 1293 through 94 is Cox referring to the total Gandhi protest, sit-ins, and flyers that we had agreed to as opposed to a violent option at the earlier meeting at Ken's buses. Cox told Olsen, this non-violent activism is much better plan than holding up in a bunker, 241. Want to be friends. Also on page 45, AER 355, Anderson testifies that he and Cox talked about the importance of being non-violent, and we, Cox and Anderson, talked a little bit about how we, Cox, just wanted to work for a while, save up, get a bunch of money, and if the economy collapses, then he'll, Cox, have gold and silver to buy a bunch of real estate or leave the country. This is exactly what Cox was doing, non-violent 241 stuff. Okay, then we go to page 46. As you can see, this is page 46. Vernon told Olsen, we're going to stir some shit. We're going to get that list and we're going to stir some shit. Vernon also explained that his wife can make a list and we could make our own list. We don't need Anderson to do it. Cox tried to contact Anderson in early March 2011 to get the database. In one day, Cox and Anderson spent hours driving to different locations so Cox could find Anderson and get the database from him. While in the vehicle together, Cox directed Olsen where to go so they could find Anderson. When he was looking for Anderson, Cox told Olsen that a friend of his owned the building that FBI rented, and if Cox really wanted to, he could get a key and get inside the building. When Cox met with Anderson a few days later and asked Anderson for the database, Anderson told him that he had already destroyed the database. Unbeknownst to Cox, Anderson had destroyed it within a day or so of Olsen contacting him about it because he was concerned about what Cox was going to do with the information. Okay, this is page 46. He has a BS alert about the database and about what Cox was going to do with the information. If we come over here, Lamoureux says that when Cox met with Anderson, Cox asked for a database. This is not true. Cox and Anderson talked about Cox leaving the country and about the importance of nonviolence and making money. See AER 355. And according to Anderson's testimony, Cox never even asked about a database or list the whole time. Anderson said, at the very end of our meeting, I just said, oh, by the way, I destroyed that thing. He, Cox, didn't say anything. AER 364. Also on page 46, Anderson was spooked by Olsen and the Vernons, not by Cox, who told Anderson of Cox's plan to leave the country and make a bunch of money to buy real estate during recessions. Okay, there's also a page 47. We're going to get over here to that. Page 47. Later, Cox described Anderson as a pretty chickened out. Undeterred by Anderson's actions, it's not like Anderson, got a monopoly or anything that can't be achieved the same way. A BS alert. Cox, Barney, and Vernon were all arrested on March the 10th, 2011. Vernon's purchased pistol, silencer, and hand grenades and were arrested. Vernon was arrested first. The morning of March 10th, 2011, Lonnie Vernon and his wife Karen met Olson, and after examining the weapons of Vernon's, purchased a .22 pistol and silencer match set and 2 hand grenades from Olson. Immediately after the transaction was completed, the Vernons were arrested. At the time of arrest, Lonnie Vernon and Karen Vernon were carrying loaded firearms. Okay, this is page 47, and then you have 47, Schaeffer. AER 1462, it's Cox telling Olson that Anderson doesn't have anything. Remember, Fulton had told Olson to tell Cox that if Cox did anything to shut down an uprising, Fulton would kill Cox, like he almost killed Zerby last time Cox shut down Fulton's uprising. So it's reasonable to expect that Cox would be non-committal with Olson. Then we go on to page 48. This is page 48. Cox and Barney examined pistols, silencers, and hand grenades and were arrested. Later that day, Cox and Barney also met Olson. Seconds after Cox and Barney got into Olson's vehicle, Olson told them that what Fulton got them was match sets of .22s instead of the XDs they ordered. He puts a BS alert on that. AER 1467, Cox responded, well, that's gay. I have a silenced .22. BS alert. Olson told Cox and Barney that Fulton did have grenades and they cost $50 each. Cox, Barney, and Olson then had the following conversation about silenced .22s. Because of the silencers, I guess they go inaudible. They'll go, the ones here will go 200 rounds, these .22s, before you have to touch anything to the oil. Barney, well, we can go light. Olson, yeah, laughter. Barney, go light and quiet. Olson, well, the thing with a silencer is you're close range anyway. Barney, yeah. Olson, you know. Cox, but see, .22s, even at close range, they take a long time to die. All right, so that's page 48. What Schaeffer has to say about page 48 is AER 1467 actually shows that Olson was buying the pistols, silencers, grenades for himself. So you have one informant selling illegal stuff to another informant. The transcript shows that Cox did not and would not agree to buy the stuff. This audio also shows that Olson was taking Cox to meet a trucker to have him and his family taken to safety. Olson, wait till you see this. But if we don't like them, you know, I told him, Fulton, I said, well, I'll take them silencers. I said, I don't know if they're going to go over. Cox, Olson, he does have grenades and they're $50. Cox, I don't know. See if Cox says anything else about page 48. Yeah, he does. Olson, the real military light ones from the Army. Cox, yeah, well. Olson, I don't know. It's Cox. That's tough. Everyone then started joking and how people are all talk. Cox says, yeah, we need the heart attack. Yeah, we need the heart attack ray guns. Olson, well, as soon as we're done here, dropping Cox off with the truck driver, I got to run back over and pay him. Fulton, or bring him back his gear, silencers, grenades in. Barney, we're not counting on him. Fulton. Olson, for me personally, anything silent like this, I'm prepared to take it. Upon arriving at the industrial truck depot, Cox points to an idling 18-wheeler and asks, is this where the trailer is? The 18-wheeler had no trailer attached. Olson, no, the trailer is still over in his yard, but we'll wake him up and then we'll go over there with him. Cox, is that him, the trucker right there? That's him there, yeah. Cox, oh, okay. Olson then jumps out of his truck to go get the items. He is saying he personally will buy them from Fulton. Cox tells Barney, I've got to get rid of those. Inaudible. Use these gloves if you touch them, because if we give them back to Bill Fulton, they're going to be, yeah. AER 1481, Cox didn't want his fingerprints on Fulton's stuff. The property owner then approaches and asks what we are doing there. Olson tells him we are there to meet a trucker named Dan Henry, who is going to haul a load for us. Then the cops swarm in like a bunch of crazy men. AER 1487. CAER 1493, Cox says violence is insanity that has no need to take place, and that the trigger-happy cowboys in the militia have to be kicked out because they are just looking for a fight, and that has no place in a society for adults who live by mutual respect. Okay. All right, let's go to the next page here. All right, I'm going to make this full page. He says, Rudy, this is document number 84 of case number 00198, page 515 of 525. This is, I think, Schulke's report, the Hank Schulke report, when the Polar Pen Team and Bottini were brought up on charges for prosecutorial misconduct. Rudy, this is a page from the special prosecutor's report on my federal prosecutors, which would be Joseph W. Bottini. False testimony to obtain a tainted conviction, implicit in any conception of ordered liberty, does not cease to apply merely because the false testimony goes on only to the credibility of the witness. The jury's estimate of the truthfulness and reliability of a given witness may well be determinative of guilt or innocence, and it is upon such subtle factors as the possible interest of the witness in testifying falsely that the defendant's life or liberty may depend. Citations omitted. See also United States v. Freeman, 650 F.3D 673 687 Circuit 2011. NAPU does not require that the witness could be successfully prosecuted for perjury. United States v. Boyd, 55 F.3D 239 243 7th Circuit 1995. In this area of the law, the governing principle is simply that the prosecutor may not knowingly use false testimony. This includes half-truths and vague statements that could be true in a limited literal sense, but give a false impression to the jury. It is enough that the jury was likely to understand the witness to have said something that was, as the prosecutor knew, false. That's certainly the case in Schaeffer Cox's situation, and it was the case in Senator Ted Stevens' situation too. Though the rule of Brady arguably applies to NAPU violations, United States v. Agurs, 427 U.S. 97 at 103, 1976, the standard of review under NAPU is stricter than the Brady standard. A NAPU violation is a hair trigger for reversal. We certainly have NAPU violations in the case of Schaeffer Cox, which is a hair trigger for reversal. Whereas the prosecution's knowing use of false testimony entails a veritable hair trigger for setting aside the conviction. Any reasonable likelihood that a false testimony could have affected the judgment of the jury. We certainly know that Joseph W. Bottini, Stephen E. Scrocky, and Yvonne Lamoureux knowingly used false testimony in the case of Schaeffer Cox. So this is grounds to reverse the conviction and to set Schaeffer Cox free on appeal. Okay, this is another page. I'm going to have to rotate clockwise, and we'll probably stop here. Okay, this appears to be page 27. Looks like this is more BS alerts, as you can tell. He highlights this. During one of the briefings, Cox instructed his men that they had to be prepared to kill federal agents and describe a scenario where they would stomp the killed federal agents through the ice. 590, next page. And he points an arrow to this. Let's see where that goes. So what Yvonne Lamoureux is saying is that they had to be prepared to kill federal agents and described a scenario where they would stomp the killed federal agents through the ice. But if you look at what he really said, now we want to avoid that at all cost. We'd rather send them packing with with their tail between their legs than kill them and stomp them through the ice or something. He goes on to say, so I brought a whole bunch of hornet's nest, which is non-lethal riot control grenades that you put in your grenade launchers, and if you got a rifle with a Pickaninny rail, phonetic, I'll give you a grenade launcher and it shoots out like a bazillion marbles, that like mop kick. and that'll just fold people up into a pretzel for 20 minutes. And then we also got all kinds of stuff, super potent CS tear gas and OC gas and stuff. And that's in AER 1185, I guess. Schaeffer also writes, "This is an undercover recording of me and Olson, the informant, on the 19th of November, 2010. This is the guy's answer to my appeal brief." All right. Let me keep going clockwise to get everything straight again. So Schaeffer wants to bring our attention to page 54, Mr. Cox, and hopefully we could, like, you know, get them to go away if they can, but they're going to be pretty brazen if they do that. He goes on to say, because here's the plan. Call it what it is. Present the evidence and then say, you have no legitimacy if you touch us. You are acting in defiance of the law at your own peril. You have no authority. You can't establish any authority, and we will have every right to defend ourselves from you. Now, not saying we are going to, but just saying we'd have the right. $300,000 hoard. Just saying that we have the right, Mr. Cox, and then lock arms, form up, and just walk out. And just walk out of the courtroom, not like run out and flee, but just walk out. Olson, just walk out with your head high. Cox, with your head high, and like, that's in AER 1186. And the next one is page 55. We know who you are, and we know who you aren't, and force their hand, because at that point we win either way. Olson, Cox, if we say you guys, Cox and the government, are a joke, and we're talking out and they just sort of look at their shoes, then it shows the government for what they are. Olson, Cox, if they say you guys are a joke and we're walking out, and can you refute this? Because if you can refute this, I'll just cooperate willingly. And they say, we can't refute that. We're just going to use savage violence on you, and we've just been as polite as can be, and we can let them use savage violence, then that shows the government for what they are. Olson, and Cox says, and then we Cox got to go down to jail. Cox, don't let them, the government, take our picture. We don't have any ID. What's your name? John Locke. Oh, I'm Thomas Jefferson, and this is my buddy Sam Adams, you know. You know what matter. Okay, that's AER 1187. And then he also includes page 97, and he says, Scrocky, Olson, Scrocky, Olson, Scrocky, Olson, Scrocky. And then he says, I want to go back for a second then, with respect to the security detail, that there was a discussion about killing federal law enforcement. Olson, yes. Scrocky, and being prepared to do that. Olson, yes. He said you need to be prepared to kill them and stomp them through the ice if you have to. That's not true. This is Scrocky coaching Olson to commit perjury at trial, and Lamoureux referenced it in her answering brief, page 590. That's a very big thing, because you've got an undercover government informant who expects to get paid $300,000 in addition to the $77,000 that he was already paid, and he's just said a lie. He just said a perjurous statement on the witness stand during trial. Scrocky knows that it's a statement of perjury, and then you have Yvonne Lamoureux referencing that perjurous statement, and that's a hair trigger for reversal, because they know that the witness is giving perjured testimony. Schaeffer goes on to say, with regard, okay, here is a super brief update so you can try to answer some questions if you are asked. Cox had a court date for tomorrow for state weapons charge. The troopers continued his case to December the 10th. Cox had a seven-step plan planned to coincide with his court date. 4. He calls out the plan Operational Nehemiah 5. 5. His plan involves civil disobedience, media coverage, and a declaration that Alaska court system as void and possessing no authority over him. Keep in mind, this is the devil's nephew, Richard Sutherland, who is an absolute evil FBI special agent. He was Olson's handler. Sandra Klein was the special agent for Buffoon Fulton. But this is an email from the special agent Sutherland. He plans to call on the troopers and demand a truce. He will provide identification to his followers to identify them to troopers so that the troopers leave them alone and refer them to Cox. He has a TV appearance on live TV scheduled for tonight to kick off his big plan. In a recorded meeting with CH5, he stated over and over that he did not want violence and that he did not want to see any cops hurt. He has an armed militia security team with C5 gas and Hornet grenades as a diversion squad if needed. There is more to the overall plan, but this is a overview, emphasis added. So over and over and over again, even the devil's nephew, Richard Sutherland, says that he did not want to see any cops hurt, and that Olson admits that over and over again. And then Schaeffer, whoops, how did that happen? Oh my goodness, how do we get... Wow, let's go back to 125. Yeah, okay. Maybe I can go to 200. Yeah, okay. The objection is noted for the record, but does not appear to warrant a response from the probation officer. This is a page from our objections to the pre-sentencing report. It shows FBI agent Sutherland's summary of the meeting Olson just lied about. Sutherland was at the prosecution desk for all of the trial, so they all knew Olson was lying. They coached it. That's incredible. Okay. This is another page. Whoops. This is page 20. Whoops. Page 20 right here. Looks like he refers to Cox's hit list, and then he refers to AR 1571, and he puts a BS meter. This is the government's answer to my appeal brief. And then I guess this is probably part of the notebook that was seized from Mike Anderson. It has the Vernon's phone number up here. I need names of federal marshals, paperwork from Vernon, SWAT, something Tolop, Ron Wall. Looks like some sort of scribble. 3 of the Curtis female DHS, Border Control, Tom Stedler, DHS, Trina Bootcamp, TSA trainer. There's no way in the world that Schaeffer Cox was trying to kill Trina Bootcamp. This is what they are calling Cox's hit list. I don't know what it is, but it sure isn't a hit list. Yeah, amen to that. That's definitely not a hit list. Schaeffer Cox loved Trina Bootcamp, and he never wanted to hurt her in any way. All right. So that's all of the letter that I got today from Schaeffer Cox. Looks like I finished all of it in 4 parts. And I'll put this on the Dropbox. Okay, it's called Yvonne Lies, May the 8th. And you guys can read this for yourself, and I'll get this up on YouTube. I pray that you guys keep Schaeffer Cox in your prayer. He's got an appeal coming up. We need to pray for justice for the wicked doers, that they get held accountable, and that they pay for their wickedness. This lady needs to pay for her participation in ruining the life of an innocent man and separating families. And she was under the tutelage of this lady over here. Her name is Karen Loeffler. And she no longer has her position, but she's still a wicked lady, and she's made a living off of prosecuting innocent men and acting like she did something special. She's a very evil, wicked lady, along with the lady behind her. This is Schaeffer Cox's address, and I pray you write him a letter. God bless every one of you.